We're going to take a deeper dive into what we're seeing on social media for Starbucks, and for that we're going to take a look at our hashtag segment. We're going to welcome in Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, and we're looking at Starbucks. As I said, Andy, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so I know that you guys' data is probably, completely all over Starbucks, as this is one of those companies that seems to be, one that's taken pictures of constantly and posted all over the place. So you probably have a lot of tweets to mine through on a Starbucks. But what is your data showing on Starbucks?
Well, the sample size for Starbucks is enormous, as you referenced, so that's always good. What we wanted to look at for this segment is, really how happy are Starbucks customers, and for that, we turn to LikeFolio Consumer Happiness Metric, which we measure over the course of time, and it's really a good way to look at a company versus itself. And you can see over the past 5 years, we've really seen kind of a steady downtrend in terms of consumer happiness for the company. A lot of it's pricing issues, and some of it's about the lines, which their mobile apps are doing a very good job of alleviating. But the one thing I did want to point out is Starbucks is one of those companies that tends to be pretty vocal about some of its opinions and gets out there kind of in the same way Nike does. And if you look, that red square is the Philadelphia incident that happened last year, where a guy was arrested at one of the stores, and it created this entire buzz around Starbucks. They shut the stores down for racial bias training for a little while, and that really caused a major problem for Starbucks for a short period of time. But what you can see is after that, consumer happiness levels right back to where they were, and even a little bit higher than they were before that. And from that point, I believe Starbucks has rallied about 40% as a stock. And so I think Starbucks is one of those companies that you kind of look for these headline risk events as opportunities to get into the stock, because they tend not to last, and Starbucks tends to have one every year or two.
Yeah, well, one thing, Andy, that's interesting too is although it's had an incredible run, on a forward earnings basis, it's traded about 26 times, which is actually pretty in line with its 5-year average. And so my question would almost be, how insulated is a company like Starbucks, just simply from a convenience standpoint and a brand standpoint, from even some of these events and, just a happiness in general? Like, even if the product isn't the best product out there in terms of, quality, in terms of coffee, which it may or may not be, it just seems like from a convenience standpoint, and what you're getting from Starbucks, that people still go there.
Yeah, it's the McDonald's of coffee. I think you're exactly right. And, the other thing that we see that I think is really interesting, when you look at LikeFolio purchase intent mentions over time, they really haven't grown very much. What's happening is, actually maybe less people or just slightly more people are going into the stores is pretty flat in terms of their customer base. They're just doing a very good job of increasing ticket size. So if you have a flat consumer base, the way that you grow revenues is getting more money per customer. Starbucks is doing a very, very good job of that. I like to think the Starbucks executives probably are looking at the history of Altria and Philip Morris and thinking, all right, we've got a addicted product base that is declining a little bit over time, but how do we squeeze the most out of them? And the best way to do that is increase the price of the products and go up market, and they're doing a very good job of that.
They certainly are, Andy, and they're also growing worldwide as well, of course. One of the most recognizable brands on the planet. But you mentioned just the sheer sample size of the social media post, and so I know that we have a couple more that we want to look over, and for that we're going to welcome in TD Ameritrade Network contributor Evelyn Baker. Evelyn, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, of course.
What have you seen this morning, or just over the last week or so, on Starbucks and just this space in general on Twitter?
Right. Well, people love to tweet about Starbucks. It can be hard to comb through all of those just within the last 24 hours. But people are definitely reacting to some headline news. Starbucks announced that they're going to add dirty needle depositories in their bathrooms. This is following allowing their restrooms to be public for everyone. And some people on Twitter weren't very happy about that. And they also weren't happy about the shakeup of their rewards program. Instead of it being a simple star collection method, I guess they're doing tiers or something now. I'm actually not a Starbucks rewards member, which I feel like goes totally against my brand, but I don't know. But we do have a tweet. Our first tweet is from Adrian at The Bucks. I think there is plenty of room for both Luckin Coffee and Starbucks. Each have different offerings. Luckin seems to be more of the fast food of coffee building so many stores this fast, while Starbucks, with its inviting and often elaborate stores, offers a much more rich and immersive experience. And this plays to Luckin Coffee, a big Chinese brand that just listed its IPO today on the NASDAQ. So people are thinking that might be a big competitor to Starbucks.
And so, Andy, I know that your guys' data is primarily focused on the domestic story, focused more on English written tweets. But when you're looking at something like this too, how much does that play into, you think, just the overall happiness and things like that as more and more competitors are coming into this space? Or is it kind of one of those things, like I mentioned, where it's more of just the insulation and the brand awareness for Starbucks?
It's both. I think that, what you're seeing in this tweet is exactly right. I think that Starbucks is facing more and more competition. They're facing competition from McDonald's, they're facing competition from Dunkin', and they're facing competition from your own Keurig at home. And so that competition tends to wear on the consumer base. And what you end up with is the very loyal, most loyal base that you can have, and the convenience of your stores becomes paramount. Starbucks already has that distribution and are doing a good job going up ticket. I think the stat was last year we saw Starbucks total growth, same store sales at 4%, and 3% was attributable to higher ticket sales. So 75% of their growth comes from moving the customers to more expensive goods.
Which is something we're going to have to take into account when we look at Starbucks later on in the show. But you have one more tweet for us, Evelyn, real quick before we have to let you go.
Right, and despite Starbucks rising prices and making those ticket prices for individual consumers rising, this Twitter user thinks that it's not going to be a big deal because Starbucks really plays toward its millennial consumers. Our next tweet is from Danielle Shea Gum. People love to hate millennials until they realize they can profit off of the ways we spend money. Only brands who learn how to cater to millennials will continue to thrive. Love the segment. And then she goes on to list some key names in her hashtag millennials list, including Chegg and Starbucks, JP Morgan, Etsy, and Square.
I think it's interesting to have JP Morgan on there, but
right.
Andy, when you hear something like this, and I know you guys have a little bit of a breakdown in terms of demographics, and real quick, does that cater kind of to what your data is showing too?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it could be part of the move that Starbucks goes to these stupid paper straws and things like that. I don't really know. I think that Starbucks has a hill to climb with the younger generation. I think there's just so many more options. But, I think for now the story is they're doing a very, very good job of monetizing the really loyal base that they already have.
All right, Andy, we could talk about this all day, but we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining the show as always.